Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Grow Your Moving Company podcast. I'm your host, Wade Swikle, owner of Two College Brothers Moving Storage and Franchising, and co-founder of the Moving Titan Retreat and Tighten Up Training. And today's guest is a neighbor of mine, practically, a local company here in Tampa. It's Jon Fasick of Premier Movers for Less Stress. And we'll talk a little bit about the name there and how it's evolved a little bit over time. But Jon has over 700 reviews and still maintains that perfect 5-star rating. He's been growing like crazy, and I can say that we compete against him quite a bit. He's one of our competitors here in the Tampa Bay area. He's definitely making his name known in the community. But like I like to say is sometimes your competition can be your best friend. It can be referral partners when you book up, or if there's a type of service that one person does and the other doesn't. It's always good to keep your competition close and talk to them, be friendly, and ultimately work together to push out the bad guys in this industry and elevate the experience for the consumers in any given market. So I always love talking to local companies because we both know the area and we can talk about nuances and all kinds of cool stuff. But thanks for coming on, Jon. Glad to have you on the Grow Your Moving Company podcast. And you're actually going to be at our June mastermind retreat that we're going to Scottsdale for. So even though we probably only live a couple miles apart, we're going to fly out there and
right.
have a great group of movers brainstorming and masterminding and working through our hurdles and talking about what we found to be successful. So I'm excited to see you out there. But tell me a little bit. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
How what's your background? How'd you get into the moving industry, and what's the journey been like since you've been in it?
Well, first of all, it's an honor to be here. Definitely when I started the company in 2019, 2020, I soon thereafter found this podcast, and I was obsessed every week looking for more content from you. So it's pretty cool to be on here. And then, and Scottsdale, I'm totally looking forward to that. I remember the very first Titan retreat that I kind of popped up last minute, probably 2 days before, found the Facebook group and saw a post on there. And I'm like, oh, shoot, this is right in my backyard. Yeah, might as well go there. And that was kind of a step in my business, a step forward in my business where I was a little bit struggling in the business. But I'll kind of maybe get back to that a little bit later. But how I got started wasn't from the industry, is actually with a logistics 3PL company for about 20 years. And they were looking to sell, and I needed a way to get out of that business, something that didn't affect my non-compete with them. Even though it's Florida, did the respectful thing, didn't go after any business that they were doing. So I thought this would be a easy transition. It had to be easier than what I was doing. Everyone that's listening knows that, moving's the farthest thing from a simple job. But yeah, 2020, kind of, mid 2020, we kind of got started. I was working both my full-time job with the other company and beginning to add on business to the point where, the two guys I had running the truck for me, kept begging more work. And then eventually I filled up the calendar. They were going to have a busy month, and my lead guy quit. So then I had to tell my old boss, hey, listen, I've been doing this on the side for the last 6 months. I'm going to have to take care of some business here. And then the next thing things started growing pretty quickly, and found your podcast and was looking for all the resources then. And I don't know, man. It's just, I had I was married at the time, or getting, engaged at that time, and everything was like grow the business for the purpose of my family. And how much of a motivator that is. I'm sure a lot of people listening, that's what they're doing it for. It's a really good motivator. So you kind of put everything into it, and we've really always focused on the sales process. I think that was one thing. Sales and customer service, how we've tried to differentiate a little bit. Now, obviously, you have to have an edge because there's so much competition like yourself in our market. I'm wondering how many of the other podcasts there have been with like one of the moving titans and then their competition. Mad respect for what your business is. I don't know. Have you had any other local Tampa movers on the podcast?
I've had Nick Friedman with College Hunks,
Right,
and he's
right.
obviously national, but he lives here in Tampa Bay. I'm trying to think. I mean, if you count Chad, he's down in Venice though, so that's not really Tampa Bay. Yeah, I don't know if I have had any other ones. I've had one of the very first episodes was Paul and Cameron from Einstein Movers when they were only in Texas, and now
Really.
there's an Einstein here in Tampa. Chris Knowles, he had a branch in Tampa for a little while. I don't think he's still operating in this area. He's focusing on Nashville, but yeah, I don't know if I've had too many others locally, but I'm friendly with several of them. I know big mans, Josh and Brooke. I don't think they've come on the podcast yet, but I'll stop in and say hi to them when I'm driving by periodically. So yeah, no, I think it's great to have like, local group of good upstanding people because the moving industry is filled with some shady characters and it's you know any I would all day love to compete against people that offered a high caliber of service like yourself versus the low baller guys that are just going out and bait and switching and doing all that stuff because it really I think it just raises the bar for everybody. It just makes the experience better for the customer. It's good healthy competition. It's like golf, you see these golfers that are going neck and neck when they're out on the course, but then when they get to the locker room they have a beer together and they're best friends, and those are a lot of their best friends. That's how I kind of look at it.
Masters Week too. Masters Week. Looking forward to that tournament. I mean, you're right. There's only a handful in our area that like I would ever refer somebody to. You're one of them. Name drop a buddy over mine, Philip Diamond with All About Moving is an amazing company as well. But there's these few brands like when you go and do the on-site estimates and you hear their names, it's like okay, well I would actually refer them if it wasn't for me being here right now. Like that's a good company, and but there's so many of these, moving titans here locally with, like you mentioned, Chad and Blake as well, and so it's kind of a cool area to be in when it comes to that. You really have to, be on your game, and the fact that you say that I do a good service, I appreciate that. But we really what I've kind of instilled in our folks is in our office is, not to be outworked and, not to let somebody else like out heart us. So like out care about that customer. And, I think that kind of comes across, especially in the sales process, trying to show that you really care. That's been one of our keys to success, and obviously it can always improve. And as you start to get a larger company, those sort of things get harder to keep that culture. I've heard you talk a lot about the culture of your company and companies in general, but that's been one of our things. But as far as I was gonna share a little bit about our 700 reviews, 5-star review rating,
Yeah, you have
and
to have a good service to A, be able to get 700 reviews, B, to maintain that perfect five.
yeah, and part of it is the out heart thing, like, really caring about the customer. And it is getting really tough. I mean, I do see, obviously we have to raise our bills with the cost of fuel going up, and everyone's feeling that squeeze. And I think you get a little bit more complaints than you probably wouldn't normally get when the bill is a little bit higher than that customer is expecting. But for us, it's really like listening to what the customer is telling you when they're calling to complain, and when they're calling with an issue. And, they'll normally tell you what they want. It's just a matter of listening and trying to find a compromise. And with my old company, I was the person that it would escalate, the call would escalate to me. And it's funny, 9 times out of 10, when it did escalate to the manager, it's a totally different vibe. But sometimes the people that are so in the mix day to day, taking phone calls, and a call comes in and they're getting a complaint call, it's easy to be very combative. And we really just, stay away from any sort of combativeness. And I think a book that Tommy Mello had recommended, I think it was Tommy Mello, it was a book called What Should We Do, Joe Carrizza. Anyway, what should we do? I mean, that's a phrase that we'll use on those phone calls, to try to not only that book's about sales, not only about the sales call or even on-site estimates, asking like, how should we go ahead and do this and let the customer tell you, but even on the complaint calls, we're doing that, just trying to get to a place where everyone can move on. I've heard a lot of like a lot of rich people say like, if you have an opportunity to settle like you and your client versus letting it escalate to another level to, getting attorneys involved or whatever, the next steps are, like, handle it now, get it off of your mind. That's going to drain on you. It's going to drain on your family when you take it home. People get way, way too caught up in that and emotional about it. And, it's okay for our customers to be emotional. It's not really okay for us to get emotional. You really have to separate that. It's another conversation of the customers getting emotional, but they've got a lot going on, a lot more. So that's kind of been our outlook. I mean, so we've settled a lot. I'll be honest, there was a customer this week where we thought they had a complaint. It was a mover that had probably been with us for about a month, and it was a 3-day move. And the last day of the move was just to help unpack. A customer had a complaint that it was like they shouldn't even have had to been there. The guys were dragging their feet on day two. We went ahead and credited the whole third day to them, just, to do the right thing. And my one of the things I tell my folks is never put a hater of our business out there in the world. So like, don't make somebody feel like we did them wrong, and then for the rest of our life or the rest of our business's life, we've got someone that if they are asked about a mover, they're going to MF my company. And so I really make it a point to never put somebody out there in the universe that hates us for whatever reason is. And I think generally speaking, every one of our customers are reasonable. They're reasonable people. It's just a matter of taking the temperature down and then finding out what they really want. And and people are reasonable. Just try to be reasonable with them. And that's really how we've kept the 5-star rating. Now, the sad thing is you kind of, keep that as your scoreboard. So we've had situations where a lower mark brings us down to 4.9, and the office is pretty depressed about it. You really like, it adds a little bit of stress to the whole situation. I'm sure you probably went through that at some point.
Yeah.
And we swear off. We're like, okay, this doesn't matter to us. 4.9 is okay. And then, you know, it's everything. It's everything to the people in the office. No, we deserve that. We don't deserve that bad remark. So
Well, that's great that your office even cares that much. I mean, there's so many people out there that, they get a bad review and they start pointing fingers and like, oh, that customer was irrational, or that, it was my guy I was working with. He was not doing as good. It definitely wasn't me. And I can't stand the finger pointing and the excuses. So one of our core values is to own it, take ownership. Whether it was your fault or not, it's your responsibility. And the fact that your company and the people in the office care that much. I remember when we were starting out, uh and if we got a bad review, it ruined my night, it ruined my week. I just dwelled on it. I was not a fun person to be around. I used to let it just destroy me, and it didn't matter if it was on Google, on Yelp. I've pretty much given up on Yelp because Yelp is just it's a whole other mess. But that I remember I even like got an attorney involved one time because we got a bad Yelp review in the beginning, and it was totally irrational. It was crazy, but we ended up, I think, cutting that. I think we refunded the whole move to try to get it down and all this crazy stuff. But you get to a point where it becomes a learning experience. And I think, like you said, people are usually reasonable. We catch them in a difficult time in their life, whether they're moving for positive reasons or not so positive reasons, like a divorce or a death or something like that. And in those situations, it's even more stressful because we all know moving's the third most stressful time behind death and divorce. And if you factor in one of those two or both, sometimes it's even more stress. So you're kind of seeing the worst in a lot of people. And hey, movers, it's Wade Swikle, and you're listening to the Grow Your Moving Company podcast. If you've ever wasted money on marketing to the wrong homes, listen up. This is why I use USA Home Listings. They're the only platform in the moving industry built by movers that not only has new home listings and under contract listings updated daily, but now offers enhanced data that can eliminate vacant homes and give you phone numbers and emails for both homeowners and realtors, giving you multiple ways to connect and close more jobs. Their vacancy AI tool removes empty homes so there are no more wasted mailing efforts, and their Tier 2 data takes it further, providing highly accurate contact details for both homeowners and realtors for email, phone, and social outreach. The result? Higher conversions, stronger ROI, and more book jobs with less spend. Check out usahomelistings.com because it's where real movers get real leads. Our attorney told me one time I had to have a conversation with a client who was refusing. I think they filed like a $10,000 chargeback, and it was a doctor. A husband and wife were both doctors, and I don't know about you, but I've found that doctors can be very difficult. They're under a lot of stress in their jobs as it is, and they have a lot of entitlement a lot of the time. Not everybody. But my sister-in-law is a doctor, so I'm allowed to talk about them. But I talked to my attorney. I'm like, how should I go into this? Just not because we didn't need to get him involved. They were making all kinds of threats to my team and stuff going into it. And
that's too bad.
And so Jeez. I prefaced him on this, and he's like, you know what, Wade, like probably your company probably makes more money than he makes as a doctor. Let's just, call a spade a spade. And so you're on his level from like a social status. And and even if you're not, even if you don't make as much as he does, you have to you have to believe in yourself that you are on that level, because he's used to pushing people around that are beneath him. He's used to pushing nurses around and patients and, office admin, and, he hires service companies, and he has this like air of superiority. And so you have to set the frame from the beginning of that call that you're on his side. You want to make this right, that you're not, who he probably thinks you are, some, low life service blue collar guy. You're an established professional, and the attorney, he kind of hyped me up. He's like, what you've done building a moving company in one of the most stressful businesses, to me, is a hell of a lot more respectful than somebody who just goes to school until they're 34 years old and then, has never really seen the real world, as it may sound like, and, works for somebody else. You're taking all kinds of risks. You're doing all these things that like this person will probably never do. And, they'll make good money as a doctor, sure. And they'll roll in high circles, and they'll be able to call themselves Dr. So-and-so, and it's prestigious. But you have to remember, you're just in a different category, but you're hanging out at the same clubs. You're hanging around the same caliber, if not higher caliber people than this person. And you just have to establish that frame from the beginning when you go into that conversation, and present it as what can we do here? What would you like to see? I'm on your side. I want to make this right. How can we settle this out? And we ended up collecting, I think, 8 out of the $10,000, and we settled for like $2,000. And everybody walked away feeling good about it. And, you just get their guard down, because I think people, especially people in high status positions, are really quick to want to just be combative, because, they're ready to fight because they're used to people pushing back and giving them a hard time. But it's
interesting.
When you can get their guard down and you show them that you're willing to work together to resolve this, and that we don't want to get attorneys involved. We don't want to have to make it all messy. It doesn't need to be like that. And just talking to them, cool, calm, and collective, not reacting, not getting upset or emotional by any acting rational, then that energy tends to be mirrored by the person that you're talking to in that dispute.
That's interesting, because I totally thought you were going the other way when the attorney was boosting you up and prepping you for it. I thought you were going to like go up against the bully, but you went the other way, and actually sounds like it worked out pretty well. You mentioned something there about chargebacks, and I don't know. I see a lot of people on the Facebook group that maybe aren't using Smart Moving, but Smart Moving, we've been doing e-checks quite a bit.
Hmm.
E-checks has been a new thing, and that's been something we're seeing more. I mean, NSFs, but the bad thing about e-check is if it takes a couple of days for you to find out.
Right.
So we've, put stuff into a storage, and then 3, 4 days later, you find out they didn't have the funds in that account. And actually, a funny story today, separate. We were doing a collection on an e-check. Called the guy like 4 times this morning. They just called back, and the wife called back, and she said, "Who's this calling?" "This is Premier Movers." And well, so and so's not here. There was some infidelity last night. He's not going to have his phone back until later today, but I'll let him know you called. Like, okay, wow, you threw me off on that one. I can't really push too hard when you throw that back. But that's something we've been working on, is like, long distance moving, particularly doing away with e-check. And I thought it would be interesting to, bring that up, see
It's
what you were
it's
seeing.
interesting, yeah, because we started doing that. When did they roll that out? Maybe 6 months ago or so.
Yeah,
It's
not too
still
long ago.
relatively new, and for anybody who's taking the e-checks and is set up for that in Smart Moving or wherever else, but I can speak to Smart Moving because that's really the only one I know right now. It's important to keep an eye on your outstanding balances report in Smart Moving. Let's see. I'm trying to think here. Yeah, I think chargebacks will not show up on your outstanding balances. So you need to pay attention to your email and like a credit card chargeback. But I believe e-checks do. And there's a report in
Yeah,
Smart Moving for outstanding balances. And if the check bounces or the e-check gets returned, it should show up as an open balance. And I think for me, I don't know if we get emails. Maybe there's something we could
there
have turned
is.
on for that. But it's easy to miss. Sometimes it goes to spam or like an updates folder or something like that. And if you don't have somebody monitoring that and catching every time that happens, that is a helpful report to see, if, oh, wait a minute, why does this person from January still owe $800? And then you click on their job profile and it's closed out, but it shows that was, it says like system user refunded, like in Smart Moving. So it's a helpful way to just verify that those e-checks are good and that there aren't people that are outstanding. And most of the time, people are really embarrassed when that happens and they're willing to make it right. It's not usually an intentional thing. They had an oversight or something else drafted right before theirs drafted, whatever it might be. And they're usually willing to make it right, or they forgot to transfer money, whatever the case may be. But that's a helpful report to monitor the e-checks. And we've seen that a little bit more because a credit card, it'll go through right away and if it's going to get approved or denied. But the e-check does take a few days. And so you might close the job out, move on, you're thinking about other stuff, and then it gets returned because it takes, the whole settling process takes a couple of days. So that I haven't seen it a ton. I'd say we're getting maybe one a month on average, maybe two some months, but that is something to note, especially for longer distance jobs or if it's going into another storage somewhere. Definitely worth paying attention to.
Yeah, no, it's actually to the point where we've always done 3% if you use a credit card, but I'm thinking I'm almost willing to eat the 3% and just have someone pay with a credit card on a long distance move, just to make sure that, because actually Smart Moving and Remedy is really good about keeping, if a chargeback happens and their paperwork is signed, I don't think we've ever lost one of those.
Yeah.
So,
They're good at fighting it. American Express can be tough, even if you've had signed paperwork. I
except for
think
that.
I think we've lost some Amex chargebacks, even though we had everything in line with it. It doesn't happen often, but I think this doctor that I had to talk to, I think that was an
It was an
American Express.
Amex.
That's why we didn't just try to fight the chargeback in that case. But
Had to be.
when you guys, so you guys are doing interstate moves now, because I think there was a period that you were
Yeah.
mostly focusing on locals.
Yeah.
How are you taking payment on the interstate? So are you doing
Yeah.
just credit card? Are you charging a portion
Yeah.
before they head out of town? Like, we'd like to charge the travel fee and that day's work before we head out of town, so at least we get the bulk of it,
Yeah.
and then just charge the unload once we finish unloading for that labor. But what do you do?
I like that structure. Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit of a training process. And, there are customers that are like, I've had a lot of pushback, hard pushback from a few customers just with not understanding the mentality where they're like, well, I don't pay you until the job's done. I'm not paying you until you get everything offloaded. And even people that we've actually, agreed upon beforehand on the terms, then we get there and we're in North Carolina, said state, and they want to refuse. So definitely to protect ourselves, we've been going to more like what you were saying there, like a 20-60 split or something like that, to where we are getting the majority of that travel, travel and fuel. I mean, with the fuel costs right now, it's something that, yeah, I mean, we can't take, big losses on stuff like that. And so it's really retraining our people to make sure that we're not putting ourselves at risk. And actually, I was in ChatGPT and like looking at what's the safest way of getting the funds. And, we're now looking into utilizing Zelle and Cash App, which I've just had a little bit of issue getting that set up for business accounts. But I mean, with the chargeback, the chargebacks that we've seen on e-checks, and it just seems to be picking up a little bit of momentum with the economy, with just in general. So yeah, that's been something.
Yeah, I
You know,
think I think Smart Moving is coming out with a feature where it can verify funds for e-checks.
that would be
I've
awesome.
heard rumors. I haven't heard it directly from them, but I've heard some people mention that they've had some conversations, and there's because I think that technology exists to where it won't process unless it can at least verify that it's all good to go. But even then, stuff could change before it actually pulls out. So yeah, it's it's interesting. Our policy charge for the service that was performed that day, and then charge for the travel before we head out for the travel. And then so there could be multiple charges throughout the process, but even that's better in my opinion from a customer service standpoint than some of these companies that want the full balance before they unload, or they hold this stuff hostage on the truck. That's
Yeah.
where it starts to get a little dicey, because you hear about those horror stories even locally, and they jack up. The problem in with that method is that they jack up the price. They bait switch
Hmm.
the customer thinks they're paying $2,000, all of a sudden they want 6,000 to unload. And then that's where you hear these horror stories. But if you're doing binding rates, or if you're doing binding travel, and I think the key is communicating every step of the way how the billing process works. So, at the time of booking, at a confirmation call before the job takes place, you have it on your paperwork everywhere where they're signing off, bold letters. You're not hiding it in fine print. It's very easy to read. And then reminding that customer, at the end of each day, because typically those bigger jobs are multi-day projects. So it avoids most issues. I haven't had a whole lot of people not just flat out wanting to pay at all when the communication is there and it matches what the estimate looks like. I want to take a second and tell you all about Tighten Up Training. As a co-founder, we've spent months and months and months and a lot of money pooling together resources from some of the best moving companies in the world. And we're excited to bring this to an online platform available to any mover to use at an affordable price. Tighten Up Training has over 200 videos, including mover training, your highest turnover position, so that you can reduce claims, streamline operations, give your team the tools to perform at the highest level of service that generate repeat and referral business and allow you to charge higher prices, as well as sales training, marketing training, business development, leadership. We're adding more content as we speak. We've got legal training in there. We've even got door-to-door training for the moving industry, thanks to Lenny Gray at the Moving Titan Retreat. We've seen a massive explosion of moving companies jumping on to Tighten Up Training since the last retreat, and people are loving it. And when you sign up and mention this podcast, we're going to give you a free 6-week onboarding course in order to learn how to hold your team accountable and get the entire team on the platform so that you can have the best off-season and summer season that you've ever had. So go to tightenuptraining.com, schedule your free demo today, and look forward to tightening up.
Yeah, I was wondering, just doing some research too. I mean, I think it's on everybody's mind about the fuel costs, and I'm sure people are dealing with that in a multitude of different ways. But the research that I was doing, it seems like from 3 months ago where fuel was until today in our area, the calculation that I'm coming up with is about 22 cents per mile difference to like cover our costs. So essentially, um, figuring out what that is. I guess it kind of is long distance is what I'm more or less talking to. But even, for us going across the bridge to Clearwater and doing a, 40-mile trip across the side of the county or whatever, that's an extra $25 in diesel right there.
And it adds up.
So yeah, we've actually went to doing basically adding travel time or adding fuel surcharge. We do it a couple of different ways, but we ended up moving up our fuel surcharge from 12 to 14% on basically that was intrastate. But yeah, yeah. What I'm curious if you've heard any different types of ways to make up that money.
Yeah, we basically charge $1 a mile based off the round trip travel time. When you run the math, at least before the fuel prices jumped up, it was around 72 cents a mile. Figure a truck gets 5 to 6 miles to the gallon. You had fuel prices around, what were they, like $4 a gallon? I think they're probably closer to five now for diesel. I'm not even sure off the top of my head
550,
what it is now.
560, yeah.
Is it 550, 560 now? Yeah. So that's how we've traditionally done it. And we were really only doing it for interstate jobs. But we've started doing that for local moves as well, because that 25, 30, $40 for a local job, that'll add up if you're doing, 20 jobs a week. Definitely becomes a real expense. We were working with an overnight fueling service before we moved our warehouses, and that made it nice because they would come overnight and fill up our tanks a couple nights out of the week, and then we'd have fuel cards for when people were on the road. But it eliminated guys having to stop at gas stations, because I noticed there were a lot of stupid accidents were happening in tight parking lots in gas stations during rush hour when everybody was trying to fill up their trailers. The lawn care companies were there, the other movers were there, the people were there rushing to work. And there was just a lot,
Right.
bumping into a gas pump or backing into somebody's car or whatever, cut a corner too tight. So we try to avoid, limiting our exposure inside gas stations for the crews. That overnight fuel service was convenient, and they basically got wholesale pricing themselves, so they were charging pretty close to market rate. We're currently not using
Hmm.
them because we have not transitioned. We're not actually able to use them where we're transitioning from right now, out of our temporary Tampa office while our main office is getting built. But once we get all the trucks over to the new office, we'll probably sign back up, or maybe get our own fuel tank and try to get the wholesale fuel price, because we've
Yeah.
got the space to do that over there.
Yeah, that would be totally ideal. That would be amazing. You mentioned the liability, the risk as you're putting the guys out there at the gas station. And it's funny, as things evolve and as business grows, you start looking at, you know, a lot of different pieces of the business as, what's a liability, what's risky. And even I find myself with personnel. We had a questionable guy not too long ago. Just we could see that he wasn't a fit, and we kind of ended up getting rid of him because we thought eventually he was going to be an issue down the road, whether it's an accident or just how he was more like vocal and just always against the grain with the other guys, even though he was a good mover. But there was a guy today that also was bragging about his picking up a safe and manhandling a safe, and it's like, I mean, he's a new guy, and it's like, I know that it's our male ego to be like, yeah, that's awesome. You just manhandled that safe, but now I'm like, are you going to be trying to do stupid stuff with your back every day that you're out there? Or is this just like you're just showing off because you're new and calculating those risks? But it was interesting how with the gas pumps, and I do agree that that's a factor. I mean, that's ideal scenario what you got going on there. You see that your guys at Wawa quite a bit actually in that down there. Guys can't pass Wawa. I mean, it's so
No, yeah, they're going to stop
tempting
at
in the morning.
Wawa regardless of if they need fuel or not. I don't know. I don't know if there's like some secret social club amongst movers at Wawa, or if it's just they're creatures of habit. But that's going to be a little unavoidable. But if they can park off to the side and go in and do what they need to do and not have to navigate through
Yeah.
the tighter areas, then because as you do grow, you can get away with a lot when you're smaller because you've just got your finger on the pulse way more. You're able to know everybody that comes and goes through your company a lot better and communicate with every single person. But once you start growing past that 1, 2, 3, $4 million mark, and you've got, several dozen crews, it's impossible for one person to keep perfect tabs on every single one of them. And you have to really start to look at the statistics and the numbers. And I mean, there's underwriters and, people in the insurance world that they make their whole living on those factors on huge scales with millions of people to determine what the cost that they need to charge for insurance or what the liability or exposure looks like. And on a smaller scale, that's really what needs to happen with your company. That's why I really we did a webinar recently with myfleet.ai, and they have a super affordable rate to help manage your Samsara, your compliance, all kinds of that stuff. And we're in the process of getting signed up with them because, it'll ultimately save a fortune if you can eliminate, out of services or, DOT violations on your scores, little stupid accidents, work comp claims, you name it. There's just so many things that given enough time, the law of averages it means that it's going to happen. What can you do proactively to reduce that law of average percent as much as you possibly can? Because I remember we got away with crazy stuff when we were under $1 million in revenue running 2-3 trucks on our busy days. We had people that had no business driving and operate. We had a trailer that we had people driving around, and I look back and I'm like, what was I thinking? Like this could have been bad. There's no way we could have scaled this without having huge headaches on our hands. So that all comes into play. I'm curious. So you mentioned you were in 3PL logistics before. For the listeners, my girlfriend actually was in that in a previous career. But I'm curious for listeners, what exactly is 3PL and how does that relate, if at all, to moving? And were there any takeaways from that career that you're able to apply to the moving?
Mm-hmm. I mean, there is stuff that, from a 3PL, third party logistics aspect that movers can do, which would be more like furniture delivery, where, maybe you receive in furniture at your warehouse from, a large furniture distributor, manufacturer, deliver it direct to their customer. So, in that business, they were actually big into the auto parts industry. And, they had warehouses, strategically throughout the state of Florida and the Southeast to where, large corporations could bring everything to like one warehouse in Atlanta, let's say, and then cover all of the Southeast with their network. And it's a great business model, but it was a special niche that they had in auto parts that really allowed them to grow really, really fast. And it's really difficult, I think, for some of the larger companies that can really fill your warehouse with stuff to do. A lot of times they want somebody with a footprint that they can deal with less 3PL services to get their work done. Obviously, like if they get one invoice instead of 20 to get all of their Florida deliveries done. But from the mover aspect, I mean, I think there's definitely a delivery angle there with delivering white glove service. It's not something that we're doing right now. It's something that we definitely would like to get into at one point. But you have to have the infrastructure for it.
Was there any takeaways that you were able to apply from a safety or logistics management standpoint by doing that, or even customer service?
Interestingly enough, like that company used all contractors. So when I did start with the moving company, I started with contractors. And so it did kind of help as far as knowing, how to handle contractors in that way. But yeah, really didn't get too much from them just because of their special niche in auto parts. And so, I kind of went into moving because it was a non-compete. Like it was like not competing with what they were doing. But if you have multiple warehouses, I think it's something to pursue. You can, you know, do deliveries for Wayfair or, you know, companies like that, white glove delivery service. And there's a lot of those type of companies out there.
That's one thing we're trying to get more into is receiving and deliveries. We already work with several interior designers, and we'll see those logistics companies come and deliver Wayfair or Four Hands or whatever vendor it is, and we've been receiving those for a long time, and then we'll just kind of take 3-6 months sometimes while their project is being built or it's all coming together, and then we'll deliver it all in one shot, set it all up, haul away the debris. And it's a really good line of work. It's typically not super price conscious because they're dealing with really high end customers that they can build in the costs, and it's relatively easy. We're transporting stuff that is a lot of times just a soft inspect where we don't have to open up that box, and we're bringing it out there in the box as long as the box doesn't already have existing damage on it from the shipping. Sometimes some of these designers, they're all a little different. They'll want you to do the hard inspect where you're opening it up and, going through everything and making sure that everything's good to go. And that gets more complicated because you have to be on top of that or else you get held accountable for any pre-existing damage that's in there. But yeah, it's good work. And, I think if there's companies out there that can pick up any recurring contracts, whether it's with something like that, or it's, maybe they're running shipments back and forth from, hub to hub or whatever, that needs a straight van, 26-foot truck for. I think that there's a lot of opportunity to be had there, freight backhauling on interstate jobs.
Mhm.
Still kind of trying to figure out, a little bit of that world to try to pick something up on a backhaul, because even if you can just cover the fuel and the drive
Mhm.
time on the way back, it makes that initial job a lot more profitable. Are you guys doing any backhauls or anything like that?
No, kind of in that same boat. Like we got to figure out something on that. And just recently started looking at some load boards to see if there was anything there, but really, no, I haven't been able to connect. Maybe hoping at the next retreat to connect with some, other moving company owners that, you can kind of partner with when things are coming our way or their way and that sort of thing. Yeah, unfortunately, we're operating out of an office right now. We've, really tried to stay conscientious of keeping our overhead down. Yeah, I just signed up with Pro Mover Accounting actually, and I think those guys are great. And so Brock over there kind of has this formula for keeping, X amount of reserves and this and that, and keeping everything in line. And so we're just not there yet to make that investment into the warehouse. But if we do, definitely, looking for different companies that can bring in. I mean, from the designer, interior designers, like you said, or different white glove delivery aspects, because I know there's demand for that because there's not a lot of people that do white glove delivery. Like Averett, I think, is one that has two men in a truck that'll do deliveries, and there's only like a couple of those type of companies, and they're not built on service. They can't really service a customer better than I think a good solid local mover could. So, but for us, we got to walk our way up there.
Hey everybody, Wade here, and I've got an awesome game-changing announcement for you. Now, I know a lot of you guys are constantly asking, how do we get more leads? How do we get better leads? You're tired of spending way too much money for pay-per-click or buying leads or LSA, whatever it may be, only to get low-paying customers that become a headache with small moves, and you don't get an ROI on those jobs. Well, the exciting news is that our friends at Moversville have just launched a new product called the Realtor Referral Engine, where they not only get in front of realtors, but they command direct response, replies, and referred business. I'm super pumped about this, but don't just take my word for it. My friend Austin Yarborough over at Central Coast Moving and Lucky Day Moving and the Moving Army, I know he's got a bunch of them, just like me. That's why we're friends, has gotten over 40 direct replies from realtors in his first month of using the realtor referral engine from Moversville. And then there's Scott with ABC Moving Systems. He's booked over $30,000 in work and made over 20 new realtor connections. What can an extra $30,000 a month do for your business? Here's what makes this kind of marketing different. These aren't just one and done jobs. These are realtors who keep referring large jobs, can introduce you to the other members of their brokerage, and then those moves can start referring more and more jobs. You have to stay front of mind though. So if you want to learn more about the Realtor Referral Engine by Moversville, head on over to moversville.com and book a quick 15-minute call with my friend Tim, who runs the place. He'll know exactly what your business needs to get set up. He can do it all to make sure that you're getting high ticket jobs at a fraction of the cost of other marketing sources. I think you're going to be happy that you did that. Don't sleep on this one. Go check out moversville.com. Look for the 15-minute intro call with Tim and report back with your results so that I can talk about them here on the show. Thanks for tuning in. Yeah, if you ever want to talk about cross-stocking, we've got more warehouse space than we know what to do with currently that we're trying to fill. And I know Derek Green out in Phoenix, who we're going to be touring in June, he's got like a collaborative. I don't know much about it, but we're going to tour his shop and you'll have a chance to talk to him about it. But that's one thing that I've thought about doing is calling the local friendly competitor moving companies and seeing if they don't have a warehouse and wanted to offer storage, if they would want to basically cross stock where they could have their clients or themselves bringing things into storage. And then you just kind of charge them, kind of a wholesale rate if it was depending on the volume. And it helps you fill your storage. If you're trying to get into a big storage unit that you have a lot of space to fill like we do, and you can mark it up to your customer and vice versa for anybody listening. There's probably a mover that is in your market, or maybe not even a mover, but another company that has a big warehouse that they're not using all of the space that would be open to a cross stock agreement. I think if it's one of the good guys that plays nice and is willing to, collaborate and doesn't see you as a threat, but more of a, somebody who's just, kind of pushing each other to the next level, there's, I think, opportunities there. That's a win-win. Helps the one company fill their space. It helps the other company get into more storage related activities at a lower rate than working with a self-storage unit or the ability to receive and use a loading dock, whereas most self-storage units don't have that ability. So, we could talk offline on that, but just wanted to inspire some ideas around it. But
Yeah.
I'm curious too. I wanted to talk, you've maintained an excellent reputation. We talked a little bit earlier about the culture of people really caring enough to get upset if you ever get a bad review come through. What are you looking for when you're hiring, whether it's a mover, salesperson, office person? I don't know how many people are in your office, but you probably have needs to hire movers regularly, like we do and most companies do. But what's your process, the vetting and, to make sure they're a good culture fit to maintain that reputation?
So I've got a really phenomenal entrepreneur. Are you familiar with the term
Yeah,
intrapreneur?
I am.
Right? So it's the entrepreneur, but he's actually working for you. He's an employee, but he's an innovator, and I have a great one of these guys in my operation, and actually I do got to give a lot of the credit to our success to the folks that really do care about what they do and how we provide service. So it's not really me. I try to motivate and inspire, but it's really about the those folks that are kind of doing the day in day out work. And so shout out to my guy Pablo, who does the interview process. I can tell you two different ways. Now, I've learned a lot from you. I've learned a lot from your seminars, your get-togethers, Moving Titan, and some other conferences we went to. So my preference is actually the group interview, which is bringing in 4, 5, 6 guys. Typically, one or two of them, 3 of them don't show up, and doing like a quick few questions, see if they're engaging, see if their first impression that you have of them is basically the first impression that your customer is going to have of them as an employee of you, and see if
That's a
that
great point.
you can kind of weed out some guys that are gonna come in the Bob Marley t-shirt and flip-flops, and maybe that's not the guy that you want to waste an hour of your morning to get through a full interview with. Or you I think the other next best method is do a 5-minute interview, schedule people for 5-minute interviews, and then obviously if they're good, they get longer. If they're not, you can get them out of your door and get back to doing important money making things more
That's
quickly.
that's interesting. So you just tell them up front that they're coming in for a 5-minute interview, and then if it's going well, you just kind of naturally extend it. And
Right.
that's interesting.
Yeah.
I've never heard
Yeah.
that before.
So the guys that get thrown out quickly don't actually feel bad about it. It's like, yep, that's all you needed to do. We'll be back with you soon. And then,
I'm
you
so
move on from
guilty of
there.
that. I'll sit down if I ever interview movers. I'll know right out of the gate that I'm not going to hire this person, but I find some little common point of interest, and like we talk for like 30 minutes, and I'm like, yeah, there's no way I'm hiring that guy. But good conversation, and I'm like, crap, I just wasted 30 minutes. I need to try that.
I will tell you though, recently my entrepreneur, he has set up a skills training. So he doesn't follow my plan. He actually will bring in individual interviews, and then he'll have them, if he likes them, he'll have them wrapping a test couch. Because his thing is that, everyone says they have experience until they get out there, and then, you realize it's a waste. Now, I think bigger companies probably have more structured, where you're like, okay, bring in 5 guys to do this training, and then do a training day. But he tries to weed them out very quickly from the people that are BSing. And, if you pass the skills challenge that he sets up for you for pad wrapping something, he's going to put you, straight into a truck and, see if you can back it up and move it around the parking lot, or if you're, BSing about that. I mean, I know everyone has probably put some guy in a truck before, says they got a ton of experience, and then, you're sitting beside them and they get ghost white as soon as they pull on to, the main highway. And, you're putting a lot of people at risk like that. A couple different aspects. I mean, if I'm doing the hiring though, I'm going to do a group interview, and so I can weed out people more quickly.
Yeah. How many times do you ask somebody if they have any moving experience and they say, well, I moved my grandma 3 times and I moved my girlfriend, into my house. And it's like, okay, like, do you have any other, what other work experience do you have? Are you looking for people that have moving experience, or are you trying to find greenhorns and train them up?
Generally, right now, we are looking for people with multiple years of experience. We do have a good core of guys that have been with the company for 4 or 5 years. So they're able to kind of, you know, the downside to people that have experience, they think they know it all. And so you do have to navigate that. But to be honest, what I've found to be more successful now is, not training them, on our way, but really emphasizing like what's good for customer A may not be good for customer B. So you really need to treat every customer as an individual. Obviously, first thing is no damages, but we found that, we get a variety of different customers. So, you really have to listen to what your customer's saying. And I think we do spend an extra amount of time talking with our customers before, like on the sales call, on the follow-up call, and really trying to get into the particulars of what they want. We'll set up a couple of different levels of service. So somebody might want an express service, or someone might want a premier service. And that's just like an indicator to our crew. We put a little tag on smart moving. We'll do VIP for the super high end clients. We moved someone that was a billionaire's son's ex-wife, and the hey, we touched the billionaire stuff kind of. So, but that was like a whole nother level of like, nobody interacts with the billionaire, kind of to what you're saying about the doctor scenario too. It's like, but they get checkbox as a VIP client, and maybe the top tier guys are going out on that. But that's something where the experience comes in a little bit of handy, because the guys may know how to do an express move and drape furniture versus doing the full pad wrapping, but you really have to be careful with that because I think the mentality typically is either everything gets wrapped or nothing gets wrapped and you sign the
Mm.
waiver. I think that's pretty much what everyone, I don't know. That's what I hear a lot. We just try to make sure that we're meeting the customer's expectation. Yeah, that's
So
kind
you
of where
said
we're at
something
with it.
interesting there. Express versus Premier versus VIP. Are those like three different packages that you offer, like three different price points, or what? Tell me a little bit more about that.
So we have worked at that. I don't think that there's enough value that you can frame in a sales call on a one-time sales call that say like you can bundle this together or bundle nothing. Like I think there are customers that you can downsell. So like you could use an express as a downsell
Hmm.
as a sort of a framing mechanism for your staff. But it's not, sometimes that's more used internally than externally.
Gotcha.
Now, not to say that I haven't tested a premier bundle, premier package, but I think the salesperson has to know their caller.
Yeah, I've toyed around with an idea like that before, and I always come back to, well, if we give them the cheaper service or less expensive service, what corners are we gonna cut there? Are we not gonna pad wrap things? Are we not gonna stretch wrap things? Are we only gonna move the big stuff? Because I just feel like if we don't do those things and they have something that gets damaged because they're trying to save some money and they signed every waiver in the world, they're still going to complain, and they're probably going to be a bigger problem customer because they're a cheap customer. Because I think we all kind of know that the cheaper customers tend to have the most headaches associated with them. And I just, I can never really piece it together because I just felt like it would just open up the door for a lot more complaints. Like if, we weren't going to do it anyway. You know what I mean? Like if you're not going to, if you're going to go into this move without doing everything you can to protect the furniture because the customer wants to save money, well, even if you went in doing everything you needed to do to protect the furniture because they wanted to save money, those cheap customers are probably going to end up causing problems. And now tag on the fact that their stuff's broken and they're going to cause a lot more problems. So I've never really experimented with it for that reason, because it's like, if we're going to provide this level of service, I want to provide this level of service. It's hard to provide a lower level of service, and still protect your reputation at the end of the day, because that customer, isn't going to be completely satisfied, even though that's what they signed up for.
Yeah, I think we maybe use the express interchangeably with budget. Just somebody that's budget focused. Like
Gotcha.
don't there are some things that you can do, but as far as the service, just to say like, well, we're taking something away. We've tested that a lot. It is kind of awkward. I mean, it doesn't help you to be more profitable to do that. I think just going at the customer aggressively as a salesperson is, and getting the highest rate that you can for what you're, the service that you're providing, whether you have to discount it. But if you say, I'm going to take away things, people don't like things taken away either.
Hmm.
I mean, there's an argument to be said that, okay, your, premier package, maybe somebody might identify with that and select that package. But still, I have tested it. I haven't found to be more profitable by having different packages like that.
Yeah, I think it's a good internal thing. You can put your maybe less experienced movers on, the quick and easy moves, and it might help you kind of categorize. Okay, this is a really particular customer. We need our best guys. We need go the extra mile, extra attention. And these guys are a little newer. Doesn't mean they're not good, but I could see internally. But I think that you have brought up another good point with the downselling or like framing. What I like to tell clients is that you're in control of your budget. What if you want to spend $800, we'll just go move the big stuff. We'll give us a list of things to prioritize, and you can stop us anytime when you're ready to, head to the unload. We'll try to communicate with you along the way. That if it's an hourly rate, okay, we've gotten 3 hours done. Do you want us to go get all these little things and, add another 2 hours to the load, or do you want to try to get those yourself because it's all stuff that'll fit in the car? And I think it's communicating that stuff to the client that, they're ultimately in control of how much they want to spend. Maybe they're not in control of what your hourly rate is, and what you can realistically get done. But I think, that has, kind of helped overcome some of those price objections from time to time. But I like your idea of like downselling. Well, we also offer this express version where we don't pad wrap anything and we don't take anything apart, and we only get these types of pieces, and we don't cover claims if there's a claim. Oh, well, like, I don't want that. I don't want any claims. Like, okay, well, I'll spend the extra money. And it's almost like kind of that, not fear tactic, but tell them, like, that you could do it to get them to go with the more expensive option. I think there's like some Alex Hormozy lesson in there somewhere
Yeah,
on price framing. Well,
that's
that kind of
funny.
leads me into my last question. We are coming up on time, but I want to continue this conversation in Scottsdale for sure. Is your name Premier Moves? So when you started and you came to that very first Titan retreat, which was paling in comparison to what some of the ones we've done since then have looked like, it was, I think, 7 of us in an
Impact was the
Airbnb.
same. The
Good.
impact was the same. We
I'm
had great
glad.
impact from that.
I'm glad to hear that. It was definitely a smaller group, and the Airbnb did not look like the pictures that we had rented out. But I'm glad you got some value out of it nonetheless. This next one, I think, is going to be a lot better of a production. But besides the point, you were Premier Moves for or Premier Movers for less back then, and you were breaking into the market. You were trying to buy up market share. You were probably 2 or 3 years in at that point. But when we were talking right before we hopped on, you said you're kind of playing around with the name, and you're becoming Premier Movers for less stress, or Premier Movers. I'm curious,
Right.
like, what's been your thought process through the evolution of your company name, and just kind of the
Well,
variations of it?
first and foremost, if I could do it all over again, I definitely would. Coming from the company I was with, we were using contractors. I thought, honestly, they were a Walmart of deliveries, let's say. Don't tell them I said that, but they were a cheap cheap delivery company, right? In that 3PL field. But so I thought I could actually deliver moving services for less as well. And then honestly, watching you and some of the other guys and talk about, you know, the value in quality customers, and how they appreciate you more. And then I just came to realize, like, I'm not a value brand guy. I'm a service first guy. And so then we weren't really matching. Like, we were trying to give all this service, and then the customer was like, hey, aren't you the for less guy? And we're trying not to charge for less. We want to pay our people well. We want to make a good amount of profit. We got our targets that we want to make. And so, you know Premier Movers, the name itself is taken, so we just added to it Premier Movers for less stress. We've got a little rebranding going with the logo. We've got new truck wraps coming out, and a little bit inspired by Eric Works. And he's done a rebrand and did quite well with it, and shared some numbers at one of the conferences that his business kind of took off. Now he was at a later stage in business, but just brand is important. I haven't really focused on brand too much. If there was one thing that I would hope to get out of this podcast, if anyone wanted to help with branding, help me out, because that's something that I'm not skilled in whatsoever. But yeah, we did hire a graphic designer, and we've got new stuff coming out, and that's just been a slow churn, and everything is just takes a little bit of time to come out. And so eventually, yeah, you're going to see a lot more vivid colors for Premier Movers for less stress.
I like it. No, that's awesome. And I've thought about rebranding a bunch of times. I mean, I haven't been in college or worked with my brother for 15 years, but we've built so much with the brand. It's just, we come up with little variations here and there. We got some nicer, gear, and some, we work with some neutral colors from time to time on some things, and we've got a 2CB format of our logo. But it's
That's cool.
at the end of the day, I always say that brands don't make companies, companies make brands. But I am kind of curious if you've noticed a shift in your clientele from, running as Premier Movers for Less to now either just kind of abbreviating Premier Movers or Premier Movers for Less Stress? Have you seen like your clientele shift at all? Was it like a cheaper customer and now it's becoming a more affluent customer?
Jury's still out. Jury's still out. Our Google, we don't have it kind of out there just yet, so it's not completely rolled out. But maybe on the next podcast after Arizona, definitely after
Sounds
Scottsdale, we'll have some feedback on that. So,
good
but looking
stuff.
forward to that.
Yeah, well,
Trying to
we need to
do
get together before Scottsdale. I'd love to continue to talk shop because I think we have a lot in common, and obviously our market, a lot of nuances that we could discuss. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing you out there. I think as of right now, and I'm not sure if this podcast will air, if this will still be the case, but I think we have 23 movers. We're going to cap it at 30, and I think there's 2 or 3 beds left. I think one of them's a bunk bed in the house, but we're already looking at getting a second Airbnb so that we can try
really
to merge it. And, we'll probably still cap it at 30 because we want to give everybody enough time to kind of do a deep dive on their business. We might, I
the
don't know.
war
We'll have to look at the
chest.
logistics of it, but
What could you tell me about the war chest?
yeah, I actually started filling out mine today. So that's basically some homework going into the event where we want to give everybody who wants to do a deep dive into their business an opportunity to present on their business. Everything from,
Oh, okay.
what's your sales process look like? Give us a background on the size of your company, financials if you're comfortable sharing those. I imagine not everybody will be comfortable sharing everything, but the more information that the companies that come are willing to share, the more feedback they'll be able to get from essentially an advisory board of 23 other movers. We've got companies that are coming that are $30 million companies, and we've got companies that are coming that are probably less than $1 million. And then there's everything in between. So no matter what size company you are, there's going to be people in the room that have either done what you're trying to do, are currently doing what you're doing at your level, or people that want to do what you want to do, and you can in turn help them. And the war chest is really just some homework. It probably takes an hour or so to get it all together, but it's a questionnaire. It's kind of a long Google form where you just talk as much as you can about your business, your processes, your organizational structure. And most of the structured time that we have at the retreat is going to be spent presenting on and deep diving into those businesses, finding out what your strengths are, sharing those ideas, as well as like, hey, here's what I'm struggling with right now. Here's the weaknesses. And you've got probably $100 million plus of experience in that room that can offer their take on
I love that.
how to overcome some of those things. So yeah, we did this back in 2019, not even through Titan Retreats. It was somebody independently who's not even in the moving industry anymore. I think he sold his company, but he organized this out in Colorado. It was right before COVID. It was like December of 19, before all the COVID madness. And I walked in there with a company in Gainesville and a little fledgling, company in Tampa. And I walked out, and within 6 months, we hit every single goal that was set. And I walked in with one idea, and the feedback that I got from the room after presenting on my business totally shifted my
I see.
trajectory. They said, you need to move from Gainesville and focus on Tampa. It's a bigger market. You need to get into storage. This is how you do it.
Wow.
And, I'm sure there were
Literally
some other
changed your
things in there.
life, probably.
It really did. And that's why we started doing what we do at Tiny Retreats, is because it was just so valuable. And Chad has a very similar story from when he first came out to one that was organized by another group, actually also in Scottsdale. And that's why we believe in it, that model so much. And I think it's going to help everybody who's in there. So I can't promise that we'll have any spots left once this airs and people hear it, but it doesn't hurt to ask. And I hope to see anybody out there fill out those last couple spots, because it's going to be a great few days. And it's gonna be fun. We're gonna, that first one we did, there wasn't any real fun baked into it, but this one we're gonna be doing workouts. We're gonna be doing dinners. Might have some
Nice.
surprise guests that live out in the area stopping by. I think there's a pickleball court on the property. We're gonna hopefully do another pickleball competition.
Well, that was fun
I think there's putt
at the
putt.
last event.
Yeah. There's a bunch of games and activities. It's a big property, so it should be a blast. So looking forward to seeing you out there too. But let's get together. So yeah,
Can't wait.
anything else you want to add before we jump off here?
No, man. Yeah, no, a lot of respect for your businesses as a person. Just thankful to be on the podcast, and yeah, let's link up one of these days.
Sounds like a plan. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning into the Grow Your Moving Company podcast. This has been a great episode with Jon Fasick of Premier Movers for Less Stress here in Tampa, Florida. Talk to you all later and tighten up in the meantime. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Grow Your Moving Company podcast. If you would like to learn more about any of the sponsors listed on this show, want to apply for the next Moving Titan retreat, or interested in owning or working for Two College Brothers franchise, drop me a line at wade@twocollegebrothers.com. Moving out. Have a great day.